Hi, I'm Sean.
And I'm Dale. And Sean is going to show us how he implemented size classes in his block animation example.
So let's take a look at the simulator with the project running up on it, and notice where the buttons are at the very bottom of the UI view. It is centered horizontally, nice up from the bottom, and you could click those buttons just like you normally would. When I rotate this, pay attention to where the buttons go. And instead of going to the up to hardware, rotate left, rotate right, I'm going to use the command arrow keys. So size classes allow you to change or add UI elements specific to the device's size
or orientation.
So
we're in an iPhone 6, and the portrait and landscape modes give us different potential layouts that would work for them. So what you're doing here is when you're going into landscape, you're taking the left, right, up, down, and you're moving it to a new location.
Yes. And that's because I thought as a user, when I have the phone vertical, I would have an easy use to that button at the bottom. And then when it's in landscape mode, your thumb can go a little farther up on the screen, so might as well put it at the top. So let's take a look at the storyboard. So right now, you've always probably wondered why there's W any H any at the very bottom right now, this right here. You've probably always just wondered what that did. So if I select that, we get this. And how would you describe this, Dale?
Well, this describes a set of scenarios under which you might want to have different designs. And any is kind of a very generic, any possible width, any possible height. And so we are dealing with all classes of devices, all orientations having a layout. If you click on the one any direction, we see now we have compact. Compact would indicate a smaller width, and we can also do compact in height. And Apple has actually, and then there's of course regular you're seeing there. Apple has basically classified the devices and their orientations into combinations of these values. So, compact, what's the other one called? Regular?
Regular.
And then compact, and then regular, and any regular, etc. And you can actually Google online the document from Apple that basically lists the combination of all possible options.
And you don't even necessarily need to do that. If we look right now, and it says compact width, regular height, look at the final values down at the bottom for all iPhones in portrait mode. So if you're working with a portrait mode on an iPhone and you want certain UI elements to appear or certain constraints, you would click this and notice how it reflects in the storyboard that we just chose that size class. If we go back up and we say, I want the phone to be in landscape mode, I could go up here to any width, compact height, for all compact height layouts, e.g. iPhones in landscape mode. And that's exactly what I want, so I'm going to select that. Notice how it's updated the UI respectively. So the first thing I did was I went to portrait mode. Or the compact width, regular height, all iPhones in portrait mode. And I added two constraints. And the way these work is if you add a UI element now, as well as a auto layout constraint, while in this size class, they will only appear in that size class. So for example, I added a center horizontally, so center X constraint here. That center X constraint is only applied when it's on this size class and no other ones. So if I delete that and I re-add it again, here we go. It's one over here. I'm going to bet it's that one, and I would be correct. Pay attention to what happens to this one, and for the sake of it, let's say WCHR. So width, compact, height, regular. And then pay attention to what happens when I go to the center. So any width, any height. It's grayed out. That means it's not being applied currently, that you can't have it be a constraint currently. And in fact, we're even getting warnings because it says, hey, you do not have enough constraints on this. But I personally know I have constraints on both the landscape and portrait mode of the iPhones, and that's all really the devices that we're dealing with right now. So
what would happen in any right now if that were run as any, and would there be a device? I mean, right now you're on an iPhone 6, so
right.
It isn't any. What is an any device? Do we know?
So any is a device that is any. So this layout is applied to anything that does not have a size class currently. For example, if we expand this, we've done iPhones. That's also iPhones, iPhone. So this is where it really comes into play. iPads in portrait or landscape, iPhones in portrait and iPads in portrait or landscape, and for iPads in portrait and landscape. So if we run this on a iPad, we will not be correctly constrained, and we are going to see it like we didn't add any constraints to it. And notice how it's pushed up all the way to the left because we haven't specified vertical, we haven't specified horizontal, and they're just all pushed up there.
And let's do a rotate right while we're here. Also messed up. So the one thing about size classes is you kind of have to play the chess game of, if you're setting specific constraints, that you're dealing with all the conditions that your app might find itself in.
Exactly.
Is there if you put a constraint on any, will it fill in the gaps for, like let's say I do, as you had done, one particular constraint arrangement, which was width, compact, height, regular. If you do it on any, will that take care of all the rest of them?
Let's take a look. So what I just did is I added an align center X constraint, so center horizontally, and I added a top constraint. So I want it to be near the top on this one. So what I'm hoping is that when it's an iPhone, we're near the bottom, else we're going to be at the top. So let's build and run this on an iPad. And we know this is going to work on an iPad because we're in any right now. So it's applied to all UIs across the board. Let's see what happens on an iPhone 6 Plus. Build and run that. And everything goes haywire.
Because
we have conflicting constraints. So what I need to do is I need to go to, for all iPhones in portrait mode, and notice this. We have all of these constraints applied to them because of the fact that we have a top space to top layout guide, a bottom space to bottom layout guide, and we have equal heights, equal widths, so everything just goes haywire. What we can do is we can actually turn off those any constraints here. So what we could do is we could look for them over here. We have two align centers, X's. So I'm going to deselect that one. I think I actually just deleted it. Nope, I did not just delete it. So we're good. So that's selecting that one. And let's turn it off.
And how are you turning it off?
On that one, I deleted it. So what you actually have to do is you actually have to select element, go over here to the size inspector, select it, and then press the delete key. Pay attention.
But I'm doing that while I'm in compact regular. So
right.
But if I were back in any, it would still exist?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So, if I selected the right center one, and I did.
Okay.
So go back to that one. So that's one of the things. Now we need to deselect the top space. And notice how over here it's made it grayed out. It's not being applied right now. So if I update the frames for our view, and I need to select a UI element for that one. Update frames. Everything's back to the state that we want it to be. So I'm going to select an iPhone 6 Plus. There we go. Sorry, I had a little rotation confusion going on right there. But notice how if we still rotate it horizontally, we still have conflicting constraints, so it's still going a little haywire. And that's something you would have to consider. So you add your constraints to any. You go to the certain ones that you actually want to have unique views. You could turn them off in the size inspector, and you could have interesting behavior go that way. There is something to note. If we're in width, compact, height, regular, so all iPhones in portrait mode, and I add a label, and I'm going to just center that on the container.
And we're doing it while we're in a particular
Size.
size.
So that's width, compact, height, regular.
That object then only exists in that size class implementation.
Notice how now we have a label. If I exit out of the simulator and run it on a iPad, oh, that's an iPhone, iPad Retina, there is no way to see that label.
So the control that you have, like left, right, up, down, rather than moving it, it could be a completely different control.
Yes.
And you might put them inside of, say, like a UI view, so that you could deal with that kind of one element's positioning, and then the things inside that UI view positioned. And then if the UI view was created while within one particular size class, it would only appear there.
Yep. So if I want to have multiple controls for the iPad to control this block, one in each corner, I could do that for iPads, and it wouldn't actually have to appear for iPhones.
So while we're talking about auto layout constraints and size classes, could we go over to the image XC assets and look at what they've done to enable assets and size classes, right?
Yep. So what I just did is we went to images.xc assets, and we have a document outline thing. It's not what it's called here, but for all intents and purposes, we could treat it just like that. I right-clicked and I did a new image set. So you could add images here from outside, and you could reference them by calling this. Right now it's called image. If I click that twice slowly,
Click. There you go.
a little faster, not actually slowly, I could change this to any text I want, and then I could reference it as a UI image named picture.
Now, right now it's only showing me, 1x, 2x, 3x, and it's saying universal.
Right. If I go over to the attributes inspector, notice how we have width any, height any. I don't want that. I want any compact and any compact. So here we go. We have our size classes appear in our image.xc assets, meaning that we could have different images based on the different size classes that you see.
And that means when we place an image and use it based on picture, when we're in a particular size class, it's going to choose the right one from this set of images associated with that for that size class context.
Exactly. So notice how it tries to tell us which one's which. I'm betting that is any, and then the dash is compact. Let's see what regular appears like, and regular is a plus.